बात करनी मुझे मुश्किल कभी ऐसी तो न थी, जैसी अब है तेरी महफिल कभी ऐसी तो न थी. See, what happens is that when you want to say so much, is you can hardly speak, and that is my condition right now. Good evening to all of you. Justice Bhushan Ramakrishna Gawai, Honorable Chief Justice of India. My dear sister and brother judges of the Supreme Court, Shri R. Venkataramani, the learned Attorney General of India, Shri Tushar Mehta, the learned Solicitor General of India, Mr. Vikas Singh, President of the Supreme Court Bar Association, Mr. Rahul Kaushik, Vice President of SCBA, Mrs. Pragya Baghel, the Secretary of SCBA, and all the office bearers of SCBA, Mr. Vipin Nair, Mr. Amit Sharma, Mr. Nikhil Jain, and all the office bearers of SCORA. My former colleague from the Supreme Court, Justice Rastogi, is here. Justice Shadda from Delhi High Court is here. Members of Registry, members of the Bar Association, and all the lawyers present here, and my family members. As I look back and review my journey, one thing I'm very confident, and I do this of course with the wisdom of hindsight, wisdom and advantage of hindsight. I can safely say that I took a right decision of choosing law as a career and becoming a lawyer, because there is no other profession in the world which keeps you so close to the society. This is the profession where you are always, you know, the trials and tribulations of men and women in this country. And then it is also very intellectually stimulating, and it gives you a chance to make a positive contribution to the society. So therefore, today, I first of all must pay my deepest gratitude to my father and mother, who made great sacrifices in raising their children in Allahabad, for the simple reason that in the first instance it was not easy for them to come to Allahabad. See, we were a family, we were staying in a small cantonment hill town called Lansdowne. My father was a lawyer, my mother was a school teacher in Government Girls High School. And then my father decided to go to Allahabad to practice before the High Court. And there were no immediate prospects for this family to go to Allahabad. But then we did, and then hangs a tale. What happened was that while we were with our mother, I was at about 6.5 years of age, my elder brother was 1.5 years senior to me, and we were in Dehradun being the maternal home of my mother. So it was winters. My mother took his children, both of us, to watch an English film called Hatari. I'm sure most of you have seen this film. It has got John Wayne and African jungles and catching of rhinoceros. So it was great fun, the movie. But by the time we came out of the cinema hall, it was already dark, being winters. And we had to cross the busy Rajpur road of Dehradun, which used to be busy even at that time. And the two of us just refused to cross the road because both of us were terrified by seeing so many motor cars and vehicles. You see, we were from Nancy. We had not seen so many cars in our life. So we just hung close to our mother, to her great embarrassment, and we were howling. So somehow we must have crossed the road at some point of time. But then my mother made a resolution that day, and she decided that the family has to leave Lansdowne. And after a few months, we went to Allahabad. My mother was transferred to Government Girls High School as a teacher in Allahabad. I got admission in St. Joseph. My brother was to follow a year later. And so the journey started, our life started in Allahabad. My younger brother, who's in films, as you know, never loses an opportunity to tell the rest of the members of the family that after all, It was a film, and John Wayne, which brought us to Allahabad and perhaps changed the course of our lives. So now we were in Allahabad, and those of you who have been to Allahabad know that Allahabad has a distinct character. There were two great institutions there, Allahabad University and Allahabad High Court. And for some reason, the city has also attracted a lot of intellectuals, writers, poets, who have made Allahabad their home. So I was very fortunate to be in Allahabad when Allahabad had retained, it still had its old world charm. Like in Allahabad University, there were many study clubs. I joined a club called Elysium, and we had discussions. We used to call a senior advocate or professor or a judge who used to deliver lecture every Saturday. And then there was a film club in Allahabad, which opened world cinema to us. It was there that we saw the film of Bergman and Kurosawa and Vittorio De Sica and our own great Satyajit Ray. But now, in any case, we were moving ahead, and in between, I was sent to study in a boarding school in Lucknow called UP Sainik School, where perhaps I spent the best years of my life as a student, and I made lifelong friends. One of them is here today in the audience. And later, the university education, first Allahabad and then JNU, taught me to be humble. It was my university education which showed me how ignorant I was. There was so much to learn. And it is in the university which first stimulates you intellectually. It is in the university that a student really starts using what is called his intellect. I was also very fortunate to have dedicated and excellent teachers, both in my school and in my university. Because teachers are very important. Not just because what they teach or how they teach you, but it is a teacher who first whets your desire to know more. It's a teacher who takes you to the path of learning and knowledge. So it was a teacher, if whatever I have achieved, great part of it goes to my teachers. So I've never planned a career in law. In fact, after doing my master's, as the president of the Bar Association has just now said, I got admission in Syracuse in an MPhil program, and but there was no immediate scholarship, so I needed money, and my father was not very keen because he wanted me to become a lawyer. He was a High Court judge by that time, and I was trying to persuade him, and there were things that were not yet finalized when tragedy struck and my father passed away. And then the entire world changed for me. I knew I had to be in Allahabad and I had to take up law. But very soon I realized that this is the only reason why I took up law, apart from other compulsions, was that I was very sure that this is one profession which will keep me awake to the problems of people. And how it was excellent, and it was very true. It actually did that. No other profession will take you so close to people as law would. As all young lawyers will know, it is never easy for a young lawyer, and so it was with me. Those who have seen Allahabad High Court must have seen the long corridors of Allahabad High Court. There were times when I used to walk the corridors of Allahabad High Court briefless, but I had hope and I had patience. In fact, Alexander Dumas in his book Count of Monte Cristo says that the entire wisdom of the world can be reduced to two words: wait and hope. So I was patient, and gradually cases started coming in, and I developed a reasonably good practice to sustain me and my family. In Allahabad, I had a neighbor who was a retired High Court judge, and I'm sure all of you in the audience must be familiar with his name. He was Justice Jagmohan Lal Sinha, the judge who gave his verdict in the Rajnarayan petition which unseated Mrs. Indira Gandhi, the then Prime Minister of India. So valuable advice came from this gentle soul whenever I sought these advice. It was so good. And I have never seen any person getting the kind of respect that Justice Sinha got from ordinary men and women in Allahabad. One day, I asked him, I didn't ask him actually, it was my friend who was taking his interview. He asked him, "Sir, don't you think you are slightly harsh to Mrs. Gandhi?" And Justice Sinha replied, "No, I was not harsh. But yes, if anything was harsh, perhaps it was the law. The law perhaps was harsh." Later, when the new state of Uttarakhand was created in November 2000, some of us lawyers, we decided to go and see for ourselves how the new High Court functions on the first day. So a group of lawyers, including me, went to Nainital, though by that time I had decided that sooner or later I'll shift my practice to Nainital, but immediately I had no plans. But when I went there, I was offered the post of Chief Standing Counsel, which I accepted, and then immediately I had to shift to Nainital. Fortunately, I also got a teaching assignment to give the law input in the Administrative Training Institute, which used to still train the civil servants in Uttarakhand. And that then began my journey as a lawyer for another 8 years, where I used to teach and I used to take law classes. See, Nainital High Court was much smaller than Allahabad High Court. Allahabad High Court is a much bigger High Court. It's the biggest High Court. Even in that time and now, it's the biggest High Court in the country. But what was different for me in going to Nainital at that time was that in Allahabad I was getting the run-of-the-mill cases like all young lawyers get in rent control and pure civil matters and service matters. Here I was defending the main cases for the government. Every week the policies of the government were under challenge: excise policy, mines policy, forest, tourism. The only difficulty was that in Nainital there were no stalwarts, there were no senior advocates whom you can go and say, "Bhai, kya karna hai?" So the only alternative was to go to the books and find solution for yourself, which I did. Luckily, as I told you, I was teaching in ATI, and ATI had an excellent library and a large section on law itself, where I was also given a very comfortable and well-heated room, because that's very important in Nainital. And that library became my second home, where I prepared my lecture and also litigated for the state. Then I became a judge of Uttarakhand High Court in November 2008, and then I realized that now the roles have changed. You see, as a lawyer, your concern is to do your best as a lawyer. The concern of a judge is not to go wrong. At least initially for the judge, kuch galti na ho jaye. Ahram Barak is a name familiar to most of us. He was the president of the Israel Supreme Court, and he writes somewhere that he was very conscious that every day he used to go and sit on a trial. He was also on trial, because every day a judge sits in his court dispensing justice. There is a man sitting somewhere in the corner who's judging a judge. So it's very important for the judge how he behaves, how he talks, how he deals with the litigants and particularly with the lawyers. Because public will judge you not just by your judgments, but your personality as a whole. Then I took oath as the Chief Justice of Guwahati High Court in January 21, and at that time we were in the midst of COVID, and then came the second wave, and then mercifully the vaccine. I still remember the vaccination which was done in not just in Assam, but in all the areas which was our jurisdiction. The lawyers, the judges, they came forward and saw to it that each judge, each lawyer is properly vaccinated, which was a huge task, but we did it. Being in Supreme Court is always a challenge and is also very satisfying. One factor which distinguishes Supreme Court from all other courts is the pace of work, the pace with which the work is done here, particularly the Mondays and Fridays. When you're a new judge in the Supreme Court, for a week or two, you don't know what is happening. So it takes time. And the second is what I said in the meeting of SCBA yesterday, that work, and that is what I'm going to miss most, is there is a Hindustan in front of you. You know, lawyers come, one case coming from Kerala, the other would be from Assam, and then Punjab, and then you know broadly the problems of all Indians are the same. We are dealing with the same problem. A century and a half ago, one judge from Madras goes all the way to Allahabad, that's in 1880s, to meet his counterpart who is a judge of Allahabad High Court. The judge who goes from Madras is Justice Muthuswamy Iyer to meet Justice Syed Mahmood of Allahabad High Court. And as we know, these are one of the first two judges, first two Indians to have become judges of a High Court in the colonial era. And they talk, they stay together for a while, and then Justice Muthuswamy Iyer goes back to Madras. Now when he goes back to Madras, somebody asks Justice Mahmood, what is his opinion, what does he think about Justice Muthuswamy Iyer? Justice Mahmood says, Justice Muthuswamy Iyer is a great judge, and definitely far better judge than me. So people ask him, why do you say so? And Justice Mahmood replies, another great judge, he replies, because I am a judge of law, and Justice Muthuswamy Iyer is a judge of fact. And a judge of fact is always better than a judge of law. So when I read this, I was a young lawyer in Allahabad, and I couldn't make any sense of it. Because I thought, how can a judge of fact be better than a judge of law? Law is law, knowledgeable person. But I think lawyers will know, judges will understand that a judge of law may sometimes not be able to do justice in a given case in spite of his deep knowledge, in spite of very sharp intellect, precisely because he's a judge of law and he may be tied down with the case laws and the laws. In order to do a justice in a given situation, one has to change the role, and from judge of law, he has to become a judge of fact. And this is what I feel, that if there is really a craft, a method of judging, which has to be learned, it is how to become a judge of fact from a judge of law in a given situation, and when the situation demands. Because, you see, it is a judge of fact who will understand how the society functions. It is a judge of fact who will know that before a person can live honestly, he has to live. This I said yesterday also, I repeat, because there is a larger audience today. Thomas Moon Telford was a judge of common pleas in England in the first half of the 19th century, and a very good friend of Charles Dickens. And Dickens praised him for his sense of justice and fair play. In fact, Dickens dedicated his book, Pickwick Papers, to Telford. Now, Telford has famously said, "Fill all the seats of justice with good men, who are not so absolute in their goodness, so as to forget what human frailties, what human weaknesses are." And see the coincidence, when he was saying this, probably at the same time, our own Mirza Ghalib, here in India, here in Delhi, was saying something similar in one of his ghazals, when he said, you know that ghazal, Ibn Maryam hua kare koi, mere dukh ki dawa kare koi, and then he says, न सुनो घर बुरा कहे कोई, न कहो घर बुरा करे कोई, रोक लो घर गलत चले कोई, बख्श दो घर खता करे कोई. So I was truly blessed to have worked with extremely talented, totally dedicated, hardworking and knowledgeable judges everywhere, but particularly in Supreme Court, from whom I have benefited immensely. I am confident that the faith in our courts and judiciary will never be shaken, and the Supreme Court of India will continue to be the torchbearer and custodian of freedom and justice in this country. When Justice Krishna Iyer gave his seminal judgment in Bangalore water supply case, he was not merely expanding the definition of an industrial workman, he was also defining the role of a constitutional court when he says, courts too have a constituency, the nation. Courts too have a manifesto, the Constitution of India. I have just now told you that I hail from a remote part of this country, but in areas which are far remoter than mine, there may be places where when a villager is harassed, when he's troubled by the system in a tehsil or a thana, you know what he says? He says, when enough becomes enough, he says, no, I'll go to High Court and I'll get a stay. So that villager knows that courts give something called stay. And if there is enough, I'll go to the High Court and I'll get a stay. Now it is this faith in the common man, which has kept our judiciary and our system alive. To the members of the bar, I say that lawyers were in the forefront of the freedom movement of this country. They were freedom fighters. And when they won freedom for this country, amongst many of them were lawyers who were sitting in the Constituent Assembly and participated in those brainstorming sessions and gave the Constitution to us, which is the vanguard of our liberty and freedom. Therefore, lawyers must speak with courage and integrity. They should always be fearless. There is a famous novel in Hindi by Hazari Prasad Dwivedi called Maan Bhatt Ki Atma Katha, in which he says, किसी से भी न डरना, गुरु से भी नहीं, मंत्र से भी नहीं, लोक से भी नहीं, वेद से भी नहीं, अगर सच के पास पे हो तो किसी से न डरना. People in this country look towards us with hope, and we must do our duty, both bar and bench, to keep our faith. I will now conclude by a poem by a well-known German playwright and poet called Bertolt Brecht. They won't say when the walnut tree shook in the wind, but when the house painter crushed the workers. They won't say when the child skimmed a flat stone across the rapids, but when the great wars were being prepared for. And they won't say when the woman came into the room, but when the great powers joined forces against the people. And they won't say the times were dark. Rather, why were they poets silent? I must thank my staff of my court as well as of my office, as without their support I could not have functioned as a judge. Mr. Jayant Arora, Mr. Nirmala Negi, Mr. Eniruma Gambhir, Madan, Mr. Anand Prakash, Davin Singh, Hitesh Kumar, and Rahul Gupta, my law clerks, past and present, who devoted precious hours to prepare briefs and made things easier for me, who labored and researched so that I could write my judgments. Aditya Dhingra, Adhiraj Bali, Hriday Gandhi, Udit, Maitri, Ayushman, Sanandika, and Swarit. My family, my mother who is here in the audience today, my wife Vaishali, who has stood like a pillar with me in my thicks and thins and had the patience to bear with me and my strong views throughout her life. My three sons, Shorin, Sharan, and Shashank, who are the cynosure of my eyes, and my two talented daughter-in-laws, Devina and Dharvi, who are working in the field of environment and journalism respectively. And my two brothers, Himanshu and Tigmanshu, who have always been my conscience keepers, my friend, philosopher and guide, mere रहबर, mere murshid. Thank you. Jai Hind.